Hey, Witch Mob! Welcome to the Who Is This Crazy Hag podcast. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in. It's great that you're here. It would be pretty lonely without you. Don't forget to share with your friends and follow on Spotify. This week, we're talking about terrorism again. I've seen terrorism and its effects too many times in my life. Right now, as we speak, children are being murdered and someone is making a profit from the weapons that killed them. It's never ending. London in the early 90s was rife with IRA bombs. Every time we set foot outside the house was a life or death lottery. One time in Istanbul, I missed a suicide bomber by 1 minute. I'd been in Taksim Square for an early lunch meeting, and we were both walking away when Semiha Kilic was stopped by police for behaving suspiciously and then hit the trigger, killing herself and injuring 10 officers. As you heard in a previous episode, I also experienced 3 attacks of terrorism in Jerusalem and almost got shot in Beirut when Hezbollah attacked the IDF and we got caught in the crossfire. I've seen enough terrorism for more than one lifetime, and I have permanent tinnitus and partial deafness in one ear from that shit. I was lucky. It's not even surprising that my 30-year-old story is still weirdly relevant today. History shows us that these acts of terrorism achieve nothing while causing maximum damage to innocent people. So, imagine my surprise when I was hitchhiking through eastern Turkey, known by its inhabitants as Kurdistan, and was picked up by a Kurdish truck driver who turned out to be a gun-running terrorist. On the surface, he seemed so normal, so I had to ask him that one burning question. Why? The following story is about his answer to that question. I'd like to remind you that I do not support terrorism in any of its forms, and this story is an account of what that man told me that day. Secret Garden is a 5-star vegan and vegetarian restaurant where you can have an incredible chef-to-table experience for breakfast, lunch or dinner. Our chef is an expert in food allergies and intolerances and can cater to any dietary need from gluten, sugar or dairy-free to creating a low FODMAPs menu or catering to any other dietary requirements you have. Stop by Secret Garden for an amazing meal or order online and pick up anytime. Grab a dessert or an ice cream while you're there. Groups are welcome with a reservation and you can discuss a custom-made menu for your event with the chef. Secret Garden has an extensive menu with excellent prices and you won't be disappointed. Mention the Who Is This Crazy Hag podcast for a complimentary drink. This story takes place in East Turkey or Kurdistan and it's called Tea with a Terrorist. One sunny afternoon on the ridge of a ragged mountain in the Kachkar Ranges in eastern Turkey, in Shavshat, just south of Ardahan, I was on the side of the road hitchhiking. As I waited for a ride, I gazed at the breathtaking scenery from the alpine village, surrounded by fields of wildflowers and butterflies, bubbling streams, and traditional wooden chalets. An endless vista of mountains and valleys stretched out toward the Shavshat Sahara Plateau. Earlier in the day, I visited Karago, one of the most beautiful alpine lakes in the area, fed by mineral and freshwater springs. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a woman from a nearby house came and handed me a glass of steaming black tea. "Come inside and eat. You must be hungry," she said, inviting me to come and dine with her family. Hospitality in Turkey is a deeply ingrained tradition that often led me to being kidnapped off streets or buses, to end up dining with or even staying with a local family in the region where I was travelling. This family was no exception, and while it was almost rude of me to decline, this story would never have happened if I had accepted their kind and generous invitation. Young and stubborn, I declined. I wanted to stay on the road and get a ride. When night fell suddenly on the mountain peaks a few minutes later, the world became an impenetrable black. Less than half an hour later, the night sky was studded with stars so bright they seemed close enough to reach out and touch. A truck rattled and rumbled up the road. I smiled into its headlights and put my thumb out. The driver pulled up and pushed the creaking door open so I could climb up into the cab. I'm going across the mountain range and halfway down the eastern border as far as B.I.T.C.H, he said. That's okay with me. He crunched the gear stick and the engine popped and spluttered as we manoeuvred up the road. Top speed was 10 kilometres an hour on the steep uphill roads. It was going to be a long night. I introduced myself. He told me his name was Hassan. He was ostensibly carrying a truckload of oranges from Russia to Hakkari in the southeast of Turkey, near the Iraqi border. A second truck travelled behind him. Truck drivers were in the habit of travelling in pairs for company and safety on the road. We hadn't travelled more than 20 kilometres when we encountered the first of many military checkpoints and identity controls. Armed soldiers and police stopped all traffic to ask interminable questions about who was going where and why. I handed over my passport for inspection. The armed soldier took a cursory glance inside the back of the truck, and Hassan casually placed a handsome BooksByRoni in his palm. I pretended not to notice. The soldiers at the checkpoints were more interested in the handful of cash than checking the truck, which practically made them the threat to national security. As we pulled back onto the road, I asked Hassan about the excellent quality of the highways throughout Turkey. Smooth tarmac with wide lanes crisscrossed the entire country. Despite the scarcity of traffic in the eastern mountain ranges, the roads were immaculate. It didn't make any sense. He looked sideways and smiled. It's for military purposes. There was a lot of military activity during my time in eastern Turkey. The Turkish border along the Georgian, Armenian, and Iranian frontiers resembled the front line of a war zone. Reels of razor wire stretched out over the hills, while helmeted camouflage soldiers marched up and down with machine guns and sniper rifles, barely concealed in their shallow trenches. Lookouts and watchtowers were posted every few kilometres, and tanks loomed threateningly on the high ground. From what I had seen on my journey, the only thing missing on the heavily guarded perimeter was the battle. We began talking, and I told Hassan I was a journalist. After we got through the routine questions about my family, husband, and nationality, I briefly outlined my travels in Turkey. Admitting I was interested in experiencing authentic village life and seeing firsthand the generous hospitality of people in the East seem to have in never-ending abundance. In return, I could share a funny travel story or two and learn something to take home with me. You know, very often what I would learn from local people was their culture and their cuisine. And if I could wrangle myself into Grandma's kitchen and cook with the local women, that was just priceless. That was one of my favourite parts of travelling, particularly around Turkey and the Middle Eastern region. While I related some of my funnier travellers' tales, we became fast friends. He asked a lot of questions, mostly about my impressions of Turkey and Kurdistan. Do you like my Kurdistan? I love your Kurdistan. It's beautiful. Many years ago, he said wistfully, it was more beautiful. Before long, we were flagged down at another checkpoint. Overall, the soldiers and police were friendly. Many of them were happy to have an opportunity to practice their English. Some of the checkpoint stops were prolonged because the soldiers wanted to show off the few phrases in English they knew, and each one trying to outshine the other. Meanwhile, Hassan was keen to get moving again, but was forced to bide his time. Almost all of them could count exactly how many days he had left until he could go home. They unanimously hated being in the East. Hassan laughed and joked with them, saying he and I were old friends. They handed back my passport, often without looking at it, and sent us on our way with a wave and a smile. In this manner, the truck skipped inspection at least 4 times during the night. "Go, go," shouted a policeman who was midway through a game of backgammon. "He's harmless," he said to his colleague, returning to the playing board. Hassan was a grim-looking 40-something Kurd. He smiled with crooked, blackened teeth and sad, tired eyes. Short greying hair and a thick 5-day growth on his cheeks made him look much older. The black and white keffiyeh, wrapped loosely around his neck, identified him as Kurdish. The keffiyeh is the black and white checkered scarf that is considered a symbol of Kurdish solidarity and resistance. It's very similar to the Palestinian keffiyeh. He had a jagged scar on his face that ran from his chin to just under his right ear. He munched on chekirdek and spat the shells out the window. Chekirdek is whole sunflower seeds with the shell, and it's a popular snack in the region. Everyone puts the whole seed in their mouth, then separates the shell and the seed with their teeth and spits out the shell. It's a particular skill to learn in the Middle East. Whenever he spoke, he took one hand off the steering wheel and looked over at me. I made a deal with him. Talk as much as you want, but keep both hands on the wheel and look at the road. I want to get to W.I.T.C.H alive. He laughed and agreed. After patting me on the back, he concentrated on the road for a while. "What do you think of the Kurds?" he asked. The 6 years I had lived in Istanbul until then, I hated that question. It's such a convoluted issue, and there is no simple answer. I had Kurdish friends. I had Turkish friends. They each had different stories to tell. The Kurds said the government had made it illegal for Kurdish people to use their traditional language, that thousands of Kurdish people, including intellectuals, journalists, writers, and politicians, had been murdered or imprisoned. They said the government was devoted to the oppression and extermination of the Kurds. They accused the Turkish state of carrying out massacres in Kurdistan, terrorizing villages, kidnapping people, and executing them. They said the Turkish government had used the terrorist organization Hezbollah against the PKK, Kurdistan Workers' Party. Just to clarify, the Kurdish Hezbollah was distinctly different from the Lebanese Hezbollah. They said the PKK guerrilla forces waged a Serhildan popular uprising, using terror against Turkey in the struggle for liberation and to keep the reality of Kurdistan alive. All of my Kurdish friends supported the cause of the freedom fighters, but not necessarily the violence. When my Turkish friends broached the same subject, they told a different story. They believed the PKK had Marxist-Leninist ideology, used violence to blackmail Turkey, and was a menace to democracy. They recognized the PKK as a terrorist organization. They believed the organization was funded through illicit drug dealings, arms trafficking, and extortion. They said thousands of people had been murdered or kidnapped and summarily executed by terrorists. The Turks believed the PKK were a bunch of undisciplined bandits using illegal means to fund a war of terror against Turkey. They accused the Kurds of carrying out indiscriminate attacks against innocent Turks. The roots of today's Kurdish revolution can be traced back to March 1924, when Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the founder of modern Turkey, issued a decree prohibiting all use of Kurdish language. Sheikh Said of Piran led one of the first major uprisings in February 1925, aimed at the creation of an independent Kurdish state. The history books say the Kurds' struggle for independence began in 1806, when Babazadeh Abdul Rahman organized the first revolt against the Turks in Mosul. Since then, the war hasn't stopped. The birth of the modern PKK began in 1974, when Abdullah Öcalan, a young Kurd, headed a group from the revolutionary youth organization Dev Genç and formed the Kurdish Workers' Party, PKK. He was dedicated to setting up an independent Kurdish state. Initially, it was backed by Moscow, but towards the end of the Cold War, support from the Soviet Union petered out. Abdullah Öcalan was abducted in 1999 and taken to Turkey from Kenya. He's been imprisoned, mostly in solitary confinement, ever since then. When it came to talking about Kurds, I never knew what to say. Speaking to Hassan, I struggled to find a way to be diplomatic. I have many Kurdish friends. They're nice people, I said eventually, telling the truth, as we rounded endless hairpin turns and drove through a small mountain yayla perched above a vertical cliff. A yayla is a plateau. Hassan made a confession. I am one of those so-called terrorists. I work with the PKK. At first, I said nothing. My mind whirred in endless circles. At the same time, my instincts assured me I wasn't in danger. I nodded and looked over at him. The muscles in his jaw were working overtime. He clenched his teeth and waited for me to freak out. Quietly, I asked him why. It's a long story, he muttered. We have all night, I countered. He proceeded to give me a history lesson and recount the lengthy and gruesome story of his life and his family. With a notebook and a pen, I recorded the story as he told it. In 1925, Hassan's grandfather, who was about 20 at the time, had fought alongside Sheikh Said for almost a year before he was killed by Turkish forces. In that same year, a Turkish newspaper had published the headline, "Wherever a Turkish bayonet appears, there is no Kurdish problem." After the First World War, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and the Turkish Republic was formed with the Treaty of Ankara in 1921 and the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923. A large portion of Kurdistan was annexed to Turkey. Hassan's family joined the fight for independence. His father, after producing 18 children, died in 1979 in heavy fighting when the government crushed resistance forces in eastern Turkey. The Kurds suffered heavy losses and were almost defeated. As we pulled in at another military checkpoint, armed guards ordered us out of the truck. A guard carrying a sniper rifle paced around inside a low watchtower nearby. We exited the truck, and one of the soldiers patted Hassan down. They looked suspiciously at my passport and demanded to know why I was there. I played the dumb tourist. I'm travelling around East Turkey. It's so beautiful here. After peeking into the back of the truck and allowing Hassan to grease their palms a little, they let us go. As we drove away, Hassan admitted he was carrying a load of weapons. He said the back of the truck was filled to bursting with machine guns, rifles, ammunition, mortars, flamethrowers, grenades, rocket launchers, rockets, and missiles. I didn't believe him. He lifted a dark coat off the back of his seat and pointed to the two guns behind him. One was an AK-47 and the other was a shotgun. That still doesn't prove anything, I said, feeling uncertain. We pulled up at a roadside cafe for a break. The second truck rumbled in a few minutes behind us. Hassan introduced me to his friend Buzzy and ordered dinner for 3. They said it was a popular lunch and dinner stop for truck drivers on this route. The food was pretty good. I actually don't remember what we ordered. We sipped tea and chatted as we ate. Half an hour later, we were ready to go again. Just as we neared the truck, Hassan put his fingers to his lips and pulled me to one side. "I want to show you this," he whispered. Underneath the crates of oranges, a false bottom concealed at least 24 crates of various types of weapons with Russian markings. They were to be delivered to a PKK base at Hakkari. Now I believed him, but I still wanted to know why. Mixed feelings churned through my heart and mind. "I will tell you the rest of my story," Hassan said. After a brutal Turkish military operation wiped out his village in the late 60s, killing his mother and 12 of his siblings, Hassan joined the Federation of Turkish Revolutionist Youth, Devgenç. Prime Minister Süleyman Demirel had sent commando groups to patrol Kurdistan. That day, Hassan escaped because he was with one of his friends and didn't go home to do his chores. His father joined the clandestine separatist Kurdistan Democratic Party, KDPT, in 1965. In March 1971, 2 of his older brothers were arrested and interrogated, then tortured and murdered. They were accused of participating in a Kurdish uprising. Hassan got married a few months later. In just over 18 months, he had 2 children to support. His 2 remaining sisters also married and moved into their husbands' family homes. They both died in Turkish commando raids on the village in 1973. Hassan had gone to ground a few months earlier because the military were rounding up people associated with Kurdish organizations. When he went home, he found his wife and children had been murdered. "That was the final straw," he muttered with clenched teeth. "I couldn't let that go. They tore out my heart." Until then, Hassan swore he wasn't connected to any violent or terrorist activities. However, he believed in a free, independent Kurdish state and had supported the cause politically. In September 1979, he formed part of a convoy to deliver arms to fellow Kurds in Iran. The Turkish army intercepted the convoy and Hassan escaped into the mountains. He had helped carry out 2 of the bombings on the Kirkuk-Yumurtalik oil pipeline. This is a 970-kilometre-long pipeline that carries crude oil from Iraq to the oil terminal in Turkey, where it can be shipped out all over the world. This pipeline has been sabotaged several times since its construction in 1970. Part of the PKK goal was to drive the Turkish economy to ruins. By 1975, Hassan had nothing left to lose. His father was fighting in Iran. His remaining brother had been killed in another village raid, shot dead while, quote-unquote, resisting arrest, according to the Turkish army. It became a war without rules. It knew no boundaries. Hassan had taken an active part in armed battles, bomb attacks, sabotages, helped set up bank robberies, conducted kidnappings, and smuggled weapons. As we passed each of the police and military checkpoints, which were 20 to 50 kilometres apart, I watched Hassan pass approximately $2,000 in crisp notes as bribes to police and soldiers who let the truck pass. I could only assume his friend in the second truck did the same. Once the trucks were thoroughly searched, when two soldiers gave them a brief once-over, a lot of obsequious smiling and profitable handshaking quickly satisfied the uniformed authorities at that checkpoint. The greasing of everyone's outstretched palms ensured the safe transportation of the illicit load to its ultimate destination. The money is too good for poorly paid soldiers and police to turn down, Hassan told me. He recounted a few funny stories about the arms smuggling racket the Kurds had devised to help continue their war against Turkey, with the help of the Turks. We used to come back from Russia with lots of good quality vodka and get them all drunk. They wised up to that after they realized we hadn't paid their bribes. As the sun rose, we drove through Kars, a sleepy border town surrounded by a perpetually moving sea of grass. All around, flat plains swayed in the breeze in a trance-like dance. As we travelled, I alternately dozed and talked to Hassan about the PKK and his function within its ranks. At one point, after hearing and seeing so much of his story, I asked him why he didn't kidnap or shoot me. The ransom for a young Australian woman would probably be pretty good, he said, nodding and grinning. But you are better off alive, so you can tell my story. He insisted he wanted people to hear the truth about the Kurdish genocide in eastern Turkey. It's not so hard to believe there was a Kurdish genocide in the 80s when you realize how hard the Turkish government worked to cover up the Armenian genocide that took place during World War I. I promised him one day I would share his story with as many others as possible. At the end of our second day on the road together, we pulled up at a cafe in Doğu and waited for the second truck to catch up. Hassan and I sat silently sipping strong black tea. He was all talked out. I was lost for words. As I parted company with Hassan, he bid me a fond farewell and kissed both my cheeks. Buzzy waved goodbye and joined his friend for tea. Confused and disillusioned, I continued my travels around eastern Turkey with an entirely altered perspective. Someone recently called this post-story wind-up a fireside chat, and I really liked the idea of us all sitting in big comfy chairs by a fireplace, or maybe on sun chairs in the summer, while listening to these stories and reading along with the book. Most of you are women, so it's like an elite fireside book club. I'm also fully aware that many of my stories are disturbing and frightening. At this point, I'd like to remind you that I'm reading from a non-fiction collection of travel stories called Few Are Oo Travel Tales I Never Told Mum. There are plenty of reasons I never told my mother, but mostly to preserve her sanity while mine went off the rails. I met Hassan and Buzzy in fairly innocent circumstances. I was a girl travelling alone and hitching a ride through the mountains. They picked me up and delivered me safely to my destination. It's ironic they were the safest men I've ever met, apart from my gay friend Ken. During my time with Hassan, I learned a great deal more about the Turkish-Kurdish conflict than I had ever learned from asking friends about it in Istanbul. It's interesting how the oppressor always calls the oppressed terrorists, and then somehow they become just that in a fight to win back what was taken. I saw this fight up close one night when I got caught in the crossfire between the Kurdish freedom fighters and the Turkish army, and would have lost my life that night if I had panicked. You can click on the episode called Bombs Away to hear that story. Again, I do not condone terrorism, but I do understand the desire to take back your freedom from an oppressor, and also the feeling that you have nothing left to lose. Unfortunately, those who do lose are mostly unarmed women and children, and those who win are mostly Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and other weapons manufacturers. If there was a profit margin to be made with world peace, we'd have it in abundance. Join me next week, where we head to Malaysia, where I pretended to be a bush to avoid being arrested.
Hey there, love bugs! Welcome to the jungle! I'm Nancy Miarelli, your guide to the ecological and entomological, i.e. bug, wonders of Ecuador. With my master's in entomology and a passion for ecology and conservation, I'm here to take you on an unforgettable adventure through the mega diverse forests and more lush than you may have expected mountainsides of Ecuador. This year, I'm excited to offer 2 unique science-focused tours. Join me for a nature journaling course where we'll sit in the grass, sketch, observe, and reflect on all the creatures and plants that we discovered. Or dive deep into evolutionary theory on my evolution tour, where you'll see what you learned in a book that one time growing on the side of a tree. Ready to embark on a journey of discovery? Visit www.scibugs.info, that is Scibugs, SCIBUGS, to learn more or find me, Scibugs, everywhere on the internet. Let's explore Ecuador and all it has to offer together.
Do you have any crazy travel stories? What's the most insane thing that happened to you while you were on the road? If you'd like to share, send an MP3 recording of your story or write it into an email and send it to thewitchmob@gmail.com, and it could feature in a future episode. The Who Is This Crazy Hag podcast is created, written, read, produced, edited, mixed, and published by BooksByRoni. If you'd like to grab a copy of Few Are Ooh, Travel Tales I Never Told Mom, find the paperback on Amazon or email thewitchpod@gmail.com to get an ebook. Also, let us know via email or on Blue Sky at The WitchPod if you're reading in a book club or a group of friends so we can give you a shout out. Don't forget to tell us where you are in the world. You can visit The WitchPod on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, and Castbox, and also Substack and Patreon. See you next week.
Bye!